A very good morning. We're glad you're still with us here on Morning at NTV. We are into our Kickstarter segment, and we are looking at, or rather reflecting on the road within the judiciary to social welfare, the challenges and of course aspects of innovation that are being undertaken. Many times, or very rarely, does it happen that you can plan a show and then hours before that show comes on board, the official or the department that ought to be on the show gets involved in a spat, or an event, an incident happens. Yesterday, an officer within, not an officer, but a driver, that is support staff, said statements that are disturbing, and the police has begun investigations. I'm joined by the spokesperson of the judiciary, Jameson Karimani, who will be giving us a perspective on the general issues of social welfare within the arm of government, but also to respond promptly to the concerns that have been raised, especially in light of what has been happening in the country. A very warm welcome to the program, Mr. Jameson Karimani.
Thank you very much for hosting me, and good morning, our viewers.
Yes, a warm welcome. We are also expecting Dr. Daniel Ronald Ruhweza, the head of Department Law and Jurisprudence at Makerere University, a little bit later, for the conversation to be as balanced as it ought to be. First and foremost, we have an incident of a driver, Stanley Kisambira, who has made very disturbing statements with regard to pay, with regard to welfare, and the general treatment that his ilk, the drivers, support staff, are receiving from the supervisors and the principals. First and foremost, before we ask the questions that could be uncomfortable, bring us up to speed with this latest concern.
Thank you very much for hosting me. First and foremost, I would want to state that it is true that the driver who is in the voice that we have, that has been circulating, is a driver of our institution. Okay. And what I would like to correct, however, is that he is not a driver of the Chief Justice, like I have seen in some of the articles being circulated around. He's our driver who is driving a judge, but not the Chief Justice. Not the Chief Justice. And he has never driven any Chief Justice, for that matter. So he's our driver, and what he states, that the salary, if we talk of a salary, we are talking about the salary which is provided by the public service. It is true that the amount of money that is stated, which is 237,000, is the amount of money that drivers earn, not only in the judiciary, but it's across, because these are civil servants, and therefore they earn the same salary across the service. If you may have an idea, that is under you what? Civil service? I am not certain of the scale, but it should be, that should be probably U7. U7. Or thereabout. Okay, 270,000. 237,000. 37. That is net. That is net. Okay, and of course, civil servants are not paying payee, so ideally, my calculations. That is now less of all the expenses that are taxed off. The taxed off. Yes, okay. That is the net money that comes to the account of the driver. Now. Like I said, this is across the whole service, not the judiciary alone. And different ministries, different departments are alive of this amount of money, which may not be sufficient probably to sustain a civil servant like a driver, came up with various ways of enabling them to have their ends meet. And I can't say that this is uniform. It may not be uniform across the service, but I will only specifically limit myself to our interventions as the judiciary on how to motivate and help our drivers be able to live. Now,
Not only drivers, by the way.
In judiciary, we have two categories
Mm.
of servants.
Mm.
We have what we call the judicial officers,
Yeah.
and we also have non-judicial
officers.
officers. Now, the non-judicial officers category is headed by the permanent secretary and secretary to judiciary. He is the one who heads that wing, and it has very many officers, because you have, like any other ministry, we also have all the departments that all other ministries have as an institution. That includes procurement, human resource, engineering and technical services. We have procurement, all those accounts departments, we all have them. And that category is called non-judicial officers. Now, the salaries they earn are salaries which are earned by other civil servants in other ministries. Because these are officers from public service who are posted to work in the judiciary, and therefore can even be transferred from judiciary to another department. So the reason why their salaries are the same like in any other department in the service. The judicial officers are not transferable to any other ministry, so they are specifically in the judiciary, and due to various reasons and after various negotiations, it was found fit that the salaries of the judicial officers be enhanced. And the government did this while also debating on how to consider other servants in all the ministries across. So their salaries were enhanced. Now, meaning, upon enhancement of the salaries of the judicial officers, the non-judicial remained with the salaries that are earned in other ministries. Now, as an institution, in order to, like I said, in order to let these other officers also have some reasonable living, basing on the circular which was released in 2018 about facilitating allowances, the judiciary leadership found it fit that they should look for a way of motivating those non-judicial staff, inclusive of the drivers. So some reasonable allowances were earmarked for various categories of non-judicial officers, and this runs from up down. Because if you come to, for example, if I give you an example of an officer like an undersecretary, this is a very senior officer.
Yes.
But if you come to our department, you will find that that undersecretary, the amount of money the undersecretary earns is far less than the amount of money a magistrate grade 2 or a magistrate grade 1 earns. Because the other category is a judicial officer, this is a non-judicial, regardless of the seniority. So that had to be devised to see how they can also, they are working with people, yes, with enhanced salaries. They must also be motivated as they work with, because they are the ones who process these payments.
That is right.
So they are processing the payment, they are seeing you earning such amount of money, and he's pocketing far less than that. So something had to be done, and some allowances had to be looked at within the law.
Though the reasoning that the one who disburses the money ought not to earn less than those he's paying doesn't actually augur well, because at the end of the day you will want to say if the person who pays the president should earn more than the president who signs on, which is not the case. Everyone must understand that the line of work they do is well set within the parameters of that job.
Exactly.
It's not exactly where if I'm the one disbursing 10 million Uganda shillings to my producer and I'm making off with one, then I should advocate to get more than
that person you are paying.
That is again,
if it was
it's
to be
a wrong
the point,
assumption.
then the people people who work in the banks would
the
be
bank tellers would be earning more than
because they pay a lot of money to people every day.
But allow me just concentrate on the driver's concern, because what it brings out is perhaps people who have been choked and are unable to speak out. Because when you listen to that audio, and if my producer can grant us the opportunity to go to last evening's bulletin log and be able to play us that audio, so we can listen to and understand what he says is a case of a person that hasn't been heard, you know, and it's frustration that they are airing out right now. Why is there no a streamlined process of hearing the kind of feedback that he gives, especially in the audio?
That is actually our concern, because these drivers have an association. The drivers in the judiciary, all of them have an association. They have leadership. The leadership of the drivers is supposed to be picking some of those concerned and bringing them forward to the administration for addressing. And the leadership expresses having not received such concern from that driver. So
the drivers' association leaders are failing the men at the bottom?
They say they have not heard from him. He has not expressed himself. Others have been bringing up issues which they have addressed, but for this particular driver, they have not picked anything from him. They even actually issued their own. They also have issued a statement about the incident.
Allow me dwell on the national conscience, because most of these events are brought about the fact that there is a trend that seems to be the order of the day. In Uganda, when school fires begin, you have a spate of school fires. When gun violence rolls out, you have a spate of gun violence. And we are looking at this pattern. I hope that criminologists and investigators will help us understand exactly what is going on. But Ubuntu, the notion of Ubuntu, humanity at its core, the ability to look at another person and understand their point of view, understand their station in life. Many have been looked at and perhaps seen as not appreciated enough. I one time encountered a driver who said that an official, a principal, can take you, or you can drive him to a supermarket, and at home your child is convulsing with malaria, you are unable to leave a meal or two, and then this official is sending you for 10 crates of roll of tissue paper. That alone tests the conscience of a man. Isn't it time principles? I know it is not part of their job. They are not human resource managers. They are not welfare officers, to ask a person at the bottom, how are you today, so they can understand that. It's a question that we shall be tackling when we return to the break. If you are watching, we are glad you are. Let's take a break, and when we return, we shall be joined by
Chisambira disgruntled driver released an audio recording which went viral, blasting the judiciary over poor pay in the midst of very many demands on their hands. Chisambira says a driver at the judiciary earns around 230,000 shillings per month.
Sincerely speaking, I'm very annoyed.
Whereas the judiciary acknowledges the little pay given to their drivers, they say they provide numerous allowances.
What the leadership of judiciary did was to look for a way of motivating the other staff, and this has been done in line with the standing orders of public service by providing some, not so much allowances, but some allowances that can bridge the gap and help them meet the ends.
In his recording, Chisambira warned of dire consequences for his boss, including a traffic crash as a result of the stress.
Sincerely speaking, jukira we motoka ata abantu babiri, ata bodyguard nata ne boss.
His case is being studied by the management, and at the end of it, they will decide on what should be done. And of course, that is done in consultation with the principal, who is the judge.
Now, Police confirms the arrest of Chisambira over threatening violence.
He issued some statements at the end of the audio, which many, especially those at the judiciary who had, were skeptical about his intention and decided to hand him over to us. He's currently detained here at Central Police Station. He has shown no interest as of now to record a statement until his lawyer arrives, so we are going to do that. And
at the moment, judicial drivers apply through the Ministry of Public Service, but Karimani says the responsibility will soon be taken over by the Judicial Service Commission. Ali Mivule, NTV.
Ali Mivule there for bringing us up to speed with what happened, especially after driver Stanley Chisambira came out with that audio. We're now joined by Dr. I must be very specific, Dr. Daniel Ronald Ruhweza, the head of Department Law and Jurisprudence at the School of Law at Makerere University. Many thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me here.
Let me ask the question, and it's a hard one. Do you have a driver?
No.
Why?
I don't think my job...
You're a don of law, you're head of department. Makerere University is the greatest institution of higher learning in the region. Why don't you have a driver?
Because I don't have an official car.
Okay. I've been beaten. All right, you find us at the point where we were discussing Ubuntu, humanity, where principles ought to have a heart and appreciate that the people that work for them, the people that are taking directives, the people that are taking the orders, also have a life. And they must be alive to the fact that they earn very little, meager salaries. And when such an individual, if you do not acquaint yourself with their state of mind, it might not be on a daily basis, but you must allow some time in a month and ask your driver how he's doing. Find out about home. Find about what is happening. Some of them could be grappling with things as serious as a pregnant wife. And you see a man is confused mentally, he's the one driving you, he could ram you into, not because he intended, but because his mind is not. Do you think there should be a new conversation and a realization that we are all humans?
That is an ongoing process that should always be happening.
That's right.
And you and I don't know whether it has not been happening. I would like to take the assumption that when you are working with an individual, conversations take place.
That is right.
But where those conversations are not taking place, then they should. It's very difficult for you to be in a position like that one without having a conversation, because you're always instructing someone on where to go and what to do. And until we hear from the person who has been receiving the direct services of that driver, I don't want us to assume that those conversations have not been happening.
You speak like a typical
I can only say, I can only say, no, I'm speaking realistically, because
right.
we all employ different individuals. It's either a shamba boy,
that's right.
Or a house help and so on. But those conversations do occur. And in case they are not occurring, then I agree with you that they should happen as quickly as possible. Yes.
Allow me to stay with you, because the conversation is on reflections on the social welfare aspects within the judiciary. There has been a lot of efforts to ensure that salaries are enhanced, the welfare of the judicial officers and support staff is improved. But just like any sector within the country, the nurses are crying, the doctors are crying, the teachers are crying. Now we have the drivers. The soldiers have also expressed themselves. Before we know it, broadcasters like Chris Higei have also, expressed themselves. But I have no reason to express myself in such a way. What is the landscape like? What is happening in the country? Just let us hear you out.
I'm glad you've asked that question, because I think that is where we should begin. First of all, conversations like the one that has been recorded do happen.
Yeah.
People speak behind closed doors. It's just that you and I never get to hear people who are expressing their disgruntled thoughts. All right? It's just that today we have these gadgets, you know, that have kind of replaced the face-to-face social conversations.
And offered a sense of security.
Exactly.
In expressing ourselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so you're able to speak as you deem fit, because you're not looking at the person you're addressing face-to-face. And I'm always cautious about that. I know many a judicial officer, and it is in very rare occasions that even us who address judicial officers would speak to them and threaten violence to their face. You get it? So this social media has kind of given us some kind of self-security in how we speak, what we say, and even how we say it. But two, I think the backdrop should be that, in my view, what I have noticed is that after COVID-19 lockdown, something happened to the social rubric of our nation and of the world.
Yeah.
I lecture at Makerere University, and these kind of conversations do happen, of students addressing you without any decorum, without any respect. You get it? And they throw it on social media. And many times we are insisting that they should write officially. But you've seen it already. It is right there. I have been a recipient
Student has WhatsApps you?
Yes. I've been a recipient of many of these kind of messages. In fact, in one case, there's a student who sent me a very poorly written email. I had to send him a link on how to write official emails to individuals.
Okay.
But what I need to emphasize is that COVID-19 brought with it certain challenges to our mental health. And as a result, we have the kind of expressions that we begin to see. I teach a subject called criminology, and one of the things we dig up in criminology is, why do people commit crime? For example, there's an allegation of a crime that has been committed, the crime of threatening violence.
Yeah.
Why would you threaten violence? Okay, so is there psychosocial help? Our counseling department at Makerere University these days is very busy because of the increase in the number of students that seek services there. So something happened to our social rubric, something happened to our mental health. And so you see, we even lost a student. There's a student who took her life around about the COVID period, which for me shows that we need to do much more in assuming that we all need some kind of psychiatric, social, psychosocial help, and not to take for granted. Even Ruhweza, who seems to look to have all his faculties together.
I would be taken aback if you required help on that front.
So the assumption is that we all need that help, and that's why you see, even with the army or in the advanced armies, there will always be a conversation. You all, even after a mission, all are required to go through that kind of assistance. I think that is where our challenge is. But number three, culture. Something has happened to our culture, and the culture of honor, that we do not seem to see, or it is not taught in spaces that it should. I mean, when did you last have a conversation on honor, or the culture of respect for certain individuals? Because thank you very much. Yes. And the language, the decorum that we use in addressing some of these issues. You get it?
That is perspective.
Yes.
That is very poignant, and the way you bring it out, of course, reveals that perhaps these conversations ought to have happened a long time ago. I'll be returning to that in as far as its ability to direct a nation is concerned. But I had asked Jameson Karimani, before we went into the transition, that we saw the story that aired yesterday, about principals and how they relate to their juniors. Is there a deliberate effort to ensure that the relationship between these is not, well, assumed to be there, but orchestrated by the powers that be to ensure that these principles interact in a more Ubuntu way, so to speak. I don't know whether it's a deliberate one or you expect, since a judge has studied and he's a man of honor, he will have the time and say, how are you, driver? How are you doing today? You know?
Thank you very much, moderator. Like you have said, it is very important when you are working with someone to understand the person you are working with. Actually, the person you work with should be your friend. That's because right. It is the person that you interact with most of the time. So you should be deliberate to understand how the person is living. Because, for example, if you talk of a driver, your life is in the hands of that driver every day. So his welfare should be somehow your concern. How he's living should be your concern. As to whether the conversation is happening, like Doctor has said, that one we can't tell whether each one of us does that. But that is what is expected. Now, what happens during the inductions that we have for our judicial officers and other staff?
Yeah.
This component comes up. How do you treat the people you work with? So we normally get some experts to come and take them through on how they should be taking those people they work with, how they should treat them. Because that person that you work with, whether he's a sweeper, whether he's a clerk, whether he's whatever rank, is an important officer to you. Because you cannot serve without that officer. And if you are serving with someone who is not happy, who is not contented with the work the person is doing, it means the performance will have to go down. And as that performance goes down, it affects also your own performance, because you are all working together. So we have been trying to bring that out during inductions, during some continuous trainings, and also to the other staff on how they should relate with their boss, on how they should relate with their boss. So, and of course that one also comes to the character. If you inculcate some of those things into me, I may take them up. Others remain in their positions and say, this is an officer of this rank, should not be crossing the line. I am the boss. You talked about something to do with the principals taking their drivers and others to go for shopping, and then you come carrying, asking him to roll a tray full of goodies.
Yeah, goodies.
And after he has dropped you home, he doesn't know what he's going to have for dinner. Yeah,
it's a very touching moment.
That is now something that has to do with what your culture. How do you relate with the person you work with? Do you feel that if you have rolled the trolley, you put for him a loaf of bread, just one, for him also after dropping it?
And I'm sure it happens to some. It's a case that those that we get to know, especially expressing disgruntlement, like Stanley, are perhaps ones who have not experienced it. We cannot actually put anyone on the spot, especially the principals. Now, we shall be delving into the general aspects surrounding the judiciary and its ability to dispense justice. But before I do that, allow me use this opportunity, because we have Doctor with us here. You say you are lecturing on criminology. We've seen a spate of gun violence in the country, and people are beginning to attribute this spate of crime to a certain factor, welfare. In the first incident, the killing of the minister, the killer was reported to have gone firing in the air and claiming he hadn't been paid for a long time. Later, it emerged that he was actually receiving his pay. And then we have the latest killing or incident at Parliamentary Avenue. Again, somebody is trying to deal with money and its inadequacies. As a criminal, you're not a criminologist, you're a lecturer of criminology.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, yes.
Let me not confuse the things.
Yeah.
Just help us sequence cause and effect. Could we be seeing a pattern of crime that is inspired by the previous?
So, and I think that is why we need such conversations. First of all, for every crime that is committed, I know that the police takes time to do some investigation, and then we begin to see a record of the statistics. One of the reasons why people commit crime, indeed, is because they are struggling with the economics of the season, and we cannot hide our head in the sand to pretend that everybody is doing well economically. But two, I also believe that by the time you decide to take the life of the person you're supposed to be protecting, then there's something that has happened in your prioritization of what your mental state is. And that is why we need to have that investigation, because we often say that the mental state of an individual affects what they do and what they choose not to do. We cannot ignore that aspect. In fact, what would be required is for these conversations to happen with all employees. How are you doing? What is going on? You get it? So really in criminology, we say that crime can be caused because of lack of things, that is poverty. Crime can be caused because of your mental health, and the social pressures that come with that. And crime can be caused even when you do not necessarily know that that is what you wanted to do, but you have been provoked into doing it. There are many other reasons why.
Greed. Some people are committing crime because they're greedy.
I remember one time the former Minister of Justice, Kahindo Tafire, said that there is this kind of primitive accumulation of wealth that can cause people also to get into crime and the certain type of crime. Now, for those, like in the case of the policeman who shot and killed the man of Indian origin, what seems to be coming out from the stories that I am reading is that this individual was not supposed to carry a gun. That means, therefore, from the police statement, that he had a prior history of mental health challenges. So now the question is, can we pick from that scenario and find ways to address mental health issues
within the force.
Within the forces? Because that is very critical. In America, for example, there are more soldiers that die after the war than during the war, because they are struggling with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Yes, so those are conversations that must be had without being ashamed. You know, experts from Butabika will tell you, for example, that the amount of drug abuse today amongst young children is much more than in the days that you and I were children. So how are these drugs coming in? When I'm talking to my students, I call them vegetables. The vegetables that you are consuming, you know, how are these, where are they coming from? How are you accessing them? And so on. So those are conversations that must be had. And I think one of the requirements for all of us employees in whatever form is that we should have periodic conversations with specialists in psychology, psychiatry.
I think that is more talk about safe spaces of expression. Because many times, like, could be a situation that could have happened with the driver is that he didn't have a safe space. You spoke about an association and he has never aired that out. It means perhaps even the association is not a safe space for him. He will be noted out quickly and told, hey, that one say this and this, and the judge, the principal is judge so and so. And by the time
in the army, where I have an opportunity to give some classes very quickly in a certain space, one thing that I learned is that the junior officers often ask permission to speak freely.
Oh my God.
Permission to speak freely. And once it is granted, then you speak your mind because you've been granted that permission.
But
so the question is, in everywhere, not just the judiciary alone, even within us, the law society, do we have permission to speak freely? Can that permission be granted? At least in law society, Uganda Law Society, we have these bar bench conversations. The bar being us, the lawyers that appear before the bench, being the judicial officers.
Sure.
I think those conversations need to be had in order to address some of these issues that don't border on necessarily the law. So in my view, therefore, Mr. PRO, I would suggest that instead of sending this individual to the police to answer for the crime of threatening violence, maybe there should be an internal conversation to help him understand that maybe even what he is doing and saying actually amounts to a crime, because sometimes the law does not necessarily answer all these unique questions.
Unfortunately, that would undermine the mandate of the police to act on crime and would set a very wrong precedent. So perhaps what you might suggest is a case of streamlining the actions of every actor in order to ensure that within that space and mandate, everything is done to the point that it's supposed to be.
But of course, I would expect that all those investigations will also be digging out some of those issues. And one other thing I can say is that regardless of how this has been aired out, it also tickles a discussion. It tickles us to try to find out, to always have those conversations that you are having, not only for the drivers, now also for other employees, to always have those interactions, meetings, trying to find out, to give them that space you are talking about, to give them a chance. If anyone has something that is really touching him or her, can air it out and see how to. Some people keep back and they don't speak out, and sometimes the things accumulate until they burst out too, and sometimes they burst out in that manner. So this gives us also, it gives us something that we have to take home and see how best we can move forward.
All right, gentlemen, I have less than 500 broadcasting minutes with us, and I shall now allow ourselves to shift from the what can I describe it as, the tone that has conditioned much of our talk today, and ask James Karemani to bring us up to speed with the management information system, that is the electronic court case, how it is going, and efforts to ensure that the judiciary performs its job better in the dispensation of justice. After that, Don, you will take us through the fact that there are concerns within the country. Lawyers are not accessible. People can't afford lawyers. The Uganda Law Society has pro bono line of work, but again, the pro bono line of work also finds itself in the wood. You will have to help us understand what is happening. Mr. Karemani, go first.
Thank you very much. I would like you to allow me, before I go to that specific electronic court case management information system, to allow me to also inform our viewers that there has been a stock taking about the manifesto of NRM. I've been following this week it started, and they have been looking at the performance. Of course, various institutions and departments had gone out to see how to implement what had been promised in the manifesto. I'm happy to say that we have been put at 90% as judiciary.
Congratulations.
So we have done great.
That's
we are at 90%, and of course, ICMIS is one of those that we had gone out to do. Electronic case information system started in 2022. In March is when it was launched. It's now over a year that it has been working. We have had some challenges, of course, like any other system, and we have been working out those challenges. And if you look at the challenges that were there maybe 3-4 months when it had been launched, compared by now, they have drastically reduced. This system is now operating in eight courts. We have the Supreme Court, Court of Appeal, Land Division, Civil Division, commercial division. We have Mengo. We recently added on Ruwero, the Ruwero circuit. So in these courts I've mentioned, cases are filed electronically. We no longer allow people to come carrying boxes of files to bring them to court for filing. And people are free to file from anywhere. People have been filing from outside the country, from their sitting rooms, as long as you can access internet.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll be asking lawyer Mabirizi why he continues to bring a whole pickup of documents, despite the fact that there is this system that can help in that. Dawn, lawyers are expensive.
Yes.
The pro bono line of work that Uganda Law Society rolls out is also a little bit grey.
Yeah.
We don't understand.
Yeah.
Sometimes people are frustrated and they don't figure out why things happen the way they are. Please, as you wrap this up, just tell us what's happening.
So it is true. For a population of 45 million Ugandans, you have, and we are probably 4,000 lawyers. So you can do the math there. It is true we are not accessible. But we also need to understand that the judiciary, by the way, we are also officers of courts.
Okay.
So we belong to the judiciary.
That's right.
Without the judiciary giving us permission to practice every year, we cannot do so. So the judiciary is just a microcosm of of legal solutions or access to justice solutions. So you have about 530 something judicial officers to a population of 44 million people. The other day I was listening to the Justice of the Court of Appeal, who are saying that they have about 7,500 cases to each judicial officer in the Court of Appeal. So of course we cannot have enough access to justice. And because of that, the services become limited and they become expensive. Now, unfortunately, right now, we do not have as yet the National Legal Aid Bill or policy, which is supposed to help to fund some of these interventions. You get it? Now, without that, that means there is nothing coming from the consolidated fund to help support this huge number of individuals that need to access justice. All of it comes from NGOs, most of them NGOs. Uganda Law Society, Uganda Christian Lawyers Fraternity, the Muslims have an NGO, and a few others. So those are really very few to help. So my proposal and suggestion often has been that what are those other informal systems that can be used to address these issues? Because you don't need to bring a person who's stolen a bunch of matoke into a courtroom. Can't it be sorted out with the LC? Can't it be sorted out with the traditional leader and so on, such that the courts are left with handling the most critical issues while we have other informal systems coming in. That's the reality.
Thank you very much. Dr. Daniel Ronald Reza, Head of Department, Law and Jurisprudence, School of Law at Makerere University. And many thanks to you too, spokesperson of the judiciary, James Karimani, for the perspective. This conversation was hijacked by events that are happening now, but it will always be continued to understand exactly how the judicial system is being improved to ensure that the dispensation of justice becomes what you out there deserve and need in a timely manner. That will do it for our Kickstarter discussion, reflections on the road to social welfare in the judiciary. But do stay with us. My colleague Priscilla Regina Naloga will be taking note of the manifesto week, taxes and young people after the break.